right, so we just read the first 9 verses of the Parsha. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions? Oh, hey, you know, let's move these to the back, maybe back by the sound booth. Okay, thanks, Peyton. Peyton's gonna pass those out, so kids, you can have something to color on and do. Oh, hey, and thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Warland. All right. All right, so we just read the first several verses talking about contributions, and this is a little bit different from other things. This is essentially as your heart moves you, right? And come and give as you will. There's not a set amount. And then there are several things that he says, hey, bring all this to the sanctuary, for the sanctuary. God says, for me, that I may dwell among the people. And then he says, according to the pattern that you're to do. All right, do we have any thoughts, questions, comments at this point? Okay, Sharon. So go ahead, Tristan, stand up. So back here, Sharon in the white.
We have obligation and then free will giving. And sometimes the obligation can feel heavy, but the free will giving is much greater for us. And it brings joy when sometimes obligation doesn't.
That's good. All right. In the back.
I just have a question. Okay. We see on the stuff like silver, gold, all precious material, and the linen is purple. That's then represent royal, right? Right. But I don't understand why the ram skin in there too, like goat hairs. Stand for. I guess it stands for something else, right? That's my question.
So I'm pondering. So on the goat's hair thing, that could be. I heard somebody say cashmere, right? It's not necessarily just the raw material, but it's also like what you do with it, right? And so it could also. Hey, but could you turn me up a little bit? I'm getting signals that I'm a little too quiet. Okay, so the idea is that like cashmere is made from goat's hair, right? Is a certain kind of goat's hair. So this is it's not. It may be a common thing, but it may not necessarily be the common thing they did with it, right? So everything was this was the nicest and most expensive materials that they had, right? So like you said, purple represented royalty. It wasn't, and the reason that it represented royalty was because the dye used for it was very rare and incredibly expensive, right? So everything that's being used is both something that is valuable, but then also God is saying do something special in particular with it. And we're going to see later on that he doesn't just say, just do it however you want, but do it the way that I showed you. And so in the case of the goat's hair, I still think it's still a very nice material, and it was something that they were using in a way that beautified the Mishkan. So what does it represent? I think it just represents the best. So I don't have an amazing like hidden gem on that. Sorry. Lisa.
So would most of this material have been brought out from Egypt, that they would be bringing? These are
Very
things that they
likely, because they were
plundered.
slaves, but then they plundered the Egyptians by requesting all these things, and God said, I give you favor, so that everybody would give it, and they did, and they received all these, yes.
Okay, so these are things that they brought out of Egypt,
Mhm.
correct? Okay, just clarifying.
Guard.
So I did a little, just a quick Google search, just why the goat hair was used for the tabernacle, and this is mere guesswork, but it does say that most of their tents were made from goat hair, because it was seen as a good material for weather conditions, and down in Exodus 26, verse 7, it says, you are to make curtains of goat hair for a tent over the tabernacle, 11 curtains in all. Like, could be used as simply a protective material, not so much a symbolic thing, but more like a practical use.
Right. Right.
Hi, I have some notes here that said sackcloth was a coarse, rough fabric made from goat hair, black goat hair, that was used in Bible as a symbol of mourning, repentance, and social protest.
Yeah, so this is different from sackcloth, right? Sackcloth was it was intentionally made rough, right? And so that was something that you would wear in order to afflict yourself physically while you're like to correspond with the lack of food and oftentimes water as well. And so it was essentially, thank you, to make your to kind of complete your self-abasement kind of a thing. So however, what the curtains and everything were made from the goat hair would have been very smooth, nice, fine, like finely done, right? And so, like I was saying a minute ago, it's not necessarily just the material, but it's also what you do with it. And so they would have made everything into the nicest way. And there will be skins, but this was not the skins that we were talking about, right? And the skins would be used as well, but okay. Good. There was another hand, I thought. Okay, up front. Yeah. Raise your hand again. We'll come here first, and then we'll come to Isaiah.
I may be way off base here, but it almost seems to me, it reminds me a little bit of the widow who put in the 2 mites. It was all she had.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems to me like the Lord is offering his self to not only the rich and those who have gold and the finer things, but also those who don't have that as well.
Yeah, so I think, yes, like there's a concept of, we'll go Isaiah next. There's a concept of everybody giving how their heart moves them, and then, but it was also so then everybody has a piece or a part of the tabernacle, and so, but it was all like top quality, right?
So that's the main, I guess the main question that I have about this this portion, and the section that sticks out to me the most is that the premise for it is every man whose heart moves him to give. And I guess when it comes to like this verse and then other verses about gifts being given, like to help in the construction of the sanctuary or to help the Levites, and when that's written to the Jewish people in this time, but what is like the appropriate application, or can it be appropriately applied and applied to our lives when we use verses like this to draw reference from things like tithe and things like how our resources should be given for God's work, and is that an appropriate application, and if so, how, and how can we use this verse, or should we use this verse in our lives?
Okay. I need a whiteboard to keep track of the question. This is a good question. So I'm gonna summarize your question to make sure that I'm understanding right. So what I hear you asking is, okay, while this had immediate prescience for those who were at that time, because hey, we're going to do this right now today, we're going to give this stuff, we're going to make it, and God's presence is going to be with us. Does it have application for us today? And I'm going to say particularly with the absence of the Mishkan and the temple and all that kind of stuff. And B, should these verses be used for guidance in giving tithes and offering and everything now, right? Tzedakah, all that. And then like a tertiary thing would be, is there like a more like a higher spiritual significance to all of it? Or is that, okay, did I miss anything? Give him the mic.
I don't know what verse it is specifically, but I know that there's also somewhere in the Old Testament, I think it has to do with the Levites, about them being given 10%. Oh, and yeah. A lot of people draw on that verse of that's why tithes should be 10%. Is that an appropriate application? But we don't have to talk about that verse. We can talk about this one. But that verse is connected in my brain to that question.
Okay. So yeah, so 10%, so I'll just real quick say 10% is 100%, like that's what the tithe is. It means 1/10. But there were more than one tithe. There was more than one tithe that was given. There was the third, sixth, and seventh year. There were special tithes, and every year there was the tithe that was given to the Levite. And the other years it was also given to the sojourner and the widow. And then, but then you also took a tithe in the years that weren't like third, sixth, and seventh, and you used that tithe to go to for the pilgrimage festivals to Jerusalem. And so every year you were giving at least 2 tithes, sometimes 3, to like fulfill all the obligations and that sort of thing. Should those be used today? I think so. The reason that I think that is because in the first century, we've talked about this several times. There's something called the Didache, which is essentially the how-to manual for accepting Gentiles into the faith. And in that, it talks about giving your teachers and your prophets a tithe of everything. Which when we see Yeshua feeding the 5,000, they collect 12 basketfuls of things of fragments left over. That was because everybody was doing what's called doubtfully tithed or whatever. Like they didn't know if what was given to them had been tithed on or not, and so then they would rip off a piece and discard it, so they're not deriving benefit of it as a sacrifice to God as part of the tithe, and that's where all of those fragments came from. And so. Yes, like in the very beginning of Yeshua faith, especially going out to the Gentiles, we see that tithing principle applied in that way, saying, yes, give a 10th of not just money, but everything. Okay, so that one was easy. So the rest of it there's actually, when I was thinking about today, I was thinking like, I'm gonna do something I don't do very often. I don't know if I've ever done this, but I'm going to take a good chunk of the next period of time that we're together, and I'm going to answer your questions, because this was actually what I was already thinking of talking about during this as like bringing out some of the things that maybe we would miss. Because how many of you, when you get to this section of Scripture, you're like, oh, the tabernacle, and we're still in the tabernacle, like, right, like we start talking, God says, hey, I want you to build me the Mishkan, and here's how, and here's what, and then here's how, and here's how, and here's how, and right, and really, like, from this point on in Exodus, we're basically talking about the Mishkan. Right? We're talking about the tabernacle. How many of you get there and you're like, right? Am I the only one? Or is it, nobody else wants to fess up? That's what it is. Like every word is from God, and this is true. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Tristan, you can go ahead and turn the mic off, and maybe just set it on a seat, and you go sit down, and then we will go back into questions, God willing, at some point. Okay. So there are several different things, A, that we can take from this, but B, to recognize about this. Number one is, can you write the elements of your question down on a piece of paper? Do you have it, that you can do that? And then just slip it to me so that I can remember to make sure I hit those points. I think I will, because those were things that I had in my mind, but I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. Okay, so here we come to, we have in the end of the previous parsha, the previous chapter, this is the actual event of cutting the covenant between God and the Israelite leaders. Okay, so we have the leaders of the people, and they say, come up, and they have this feast before the Lord, and it says they see God, and you know, there's all kinds of stuff, right? But that meal is significant because it's not just, and it's also significant that's not just Moses and Hashem, but it's the leaders of the people, the elders and Hashem. So it's representative of everybody coming into covenant. And then God immediately turns around and says, after another 40 days and nights, he comes in and says, hey, this is what I want you to do, right? Build me a tabernacle, build me a mishkan, a place that I can dwell amongst the people. Excuse me. And this fills, there's more, the Torah spends more time on this than anything else, right? The creation of the entire world takes up a single chapter. The universe is created in chapter 1. Bereshit, chapter 1, that's it. And at the end, we have mankind. We have everything that's going to be created, including Shabbat. Bow is done. Okay, by the beginning of chapter 2, that's it. And here we have the Mishkan, and we have 20 chapters or something, I didn't count. I'm just throwing that number out there, but it's a lot. And when we get here, I think there is a tendency, especially for those of us from a Christian background, where this kind of stuff was like poo-pooed and like, oh yeah, God's done away with that anyway, and it's not super important, doesn't apply to our life, let's just kind of move on. Yeah, passing notes in synagogue. All right. Okay. Yes. Okay. I'm going to stand up because I think better. Did I read the question? It's just a restating of what we just mentioned earlier, of like talking about everybody coming and giving things as their heart had moved them, and then how do we apply it today, and this sort of thing. Okay. So when we come here, the first thing that we need to recognize is that God does not waste his breath. He does not waste ink. He does not just speak to hear himself. He doesn't have any need of building himself up, and some people are like, oh, that guy's just talking to hear himself speak. No, I might do that sometimes, but God does not do that. Okay, so the other thing is that if God is spending this much time on the Mishkan, do you think it's important? Okay. If we come to this point and we're bored, we're missing something. Okay? So, I'm going to talk about a few things that I think are significant and are important from this. And along the way, we're going to talk about, I hope we're going to cover these things that that Isaiah had brought up, and it was a very good question. Probably a lot of people were wondering, like, what is the significance of this? Is it just for back in the wilderness, or does it have application for us today, and that sort of thing? And I think it absolutely 100%, 1,000% has application for us today, especially as Messianic believers. All right. First thing we're going to talk about is in verse, at the beginning, it says, verse 2, it says, Adonai spoke to Moses, I want to say Moshe. Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, tell Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, take up an offering for me. From anyone whose heart compels him, you are to take my offering. And these are the contributions you are to receive from them. Okay, so first of all, we have anybody whose heart moves them is to come and bring the offering. This is very different from everything that we've had to this point. God says, you shall do this. You shall not do that. I don't care how you feel about it. I don't care if you're excited or happy, disappointed, whatever. I don't care if you're tired or if you're well rested. This is what you're going to do. This is what you're not going to do. Okay? And there are things in our life that we would do or not do that would be good or bad in and of themselves. Okay? An example that I heard this week was that if somebody wants to build a hospital, but they want to put their name on it, and the reason why they want to build the hospital is because they want everybody to think that they're such a great person, right? They're very philanthropic, they really care about people, and really all they care about is the grandeur. All they care about is that people know their name, but they built the hospital to do it, okay? The act of building the hospital is, and providing those services is in and of itself a good thing, whether the motive behind it was pure or not, okay? There are other things that, like, depending, like, the outcome of which may not be good, whether the intention is good or not. So, perpetuating a, how do we say, like let's say perpetuating a cycle that would enable an addict to remain an addict without any change in their life, but we're just supporting them, we're just loving them, we're just going to give them, we're going to provide their housing and their food and their, some spending money, whatever, just so that they can keep doing this. They don't have to worry about cleaning up. Like, that's going to, as a society, that's whether, like, the intention is good, like, we really actually want to help this person, but it's misguided, right? And no matter what the best intentions are, you're going to end up harming that person because you're not helping them out of the death that they're in, right? And so there are things that are inherently good or bad, whatever the motive is of the person doing it. The action in and of itself has value. Okay? We're on the same page. Okay. So, when it comes to this, when it comes to religious rites, we'll say, what's significant isn't the rite, isn't the thing that we're doing. What's the most, you can take that only so far, but please stay with me with this, right? You can't do a horrible thing, call it a religious rite, and I'm doing it for the right reasons, therefore it redeems that act, right? So but what we're talking about is rites that are not inherently, like, this is inherently a good thing, this is inherently a bad thing. So, in this case, bringing the terumah, the offering to God, is this rite, okay? Where the act in and of itself is not necessarily good or bad, but God says I want their heart to be in it. If the inverse is something that we're missing here, but the inverse is if their heart doesn't move them, then tell them not to bring it, right? That's the implication here, is that we need to bring, the Israelites, I should say at this point, are bringing to God something that is of value to them because they just want to be a blessing to God. Okay. Going through let's say, fasting on Yom Kippur, right? This is a rite. It's not good or bad in and of itself, but the motive behind what we're doing and why is of utmost importance, right? I can be on a fast as a diet because I want to lose something, and it's Yom Kippur, great, right? I'm not getting any spiritual benefit from it. I'm not doing anything for God. He doesn't need my favor, first of all. But second of all, because my attention and my direction is not focused on God, there's no real spiritual value, even though I'm going through the same motions as everyone else. Conversely, if I come in, I say, I'm going to, like this year, I'm not just, maybe sometimes I just fast sweet things, or what, like this year I'm going to fast all of the food, and I'm going to fast water the entire time, which I've never done this before. I'm going to do this, and I just, why? Because I want to honor God, and I know that this is really what He's asking, and so I'm going to do it with all of my heart, and I'm going to seek His face. I want to hear His voice. I want to get strength from Him so that I can continue to live for. Like now, we're talking about a complete shift, right? Now our heart is in it. Now we're focused towards Him, and we're doing what we're doing for the right reasons, right? We're doing it to honor our God and King, and we're doing what He asked, and we're doing it how He, like, hey, I want to do everything I can. Hey, this is just one, like, I'm just pulling this off of the top of my mind. So there's spiritual in the always the nicer stuff, right? This is always the best. And so this brings out another question, which comes back to the money thing, right? The valuable, something that is of high value that I have. God says, everybody whose heart moves them, I want them to bring me something, but He doesn't say you can just bring me whatever you want. He says, this is very similar to Cain and Abel. Okay, there's actually people think, well, Abel brought the lamb, and so therefore he was accepted, and Cain brought the produce, and that's why he wasn't accepted. No, it was whether they brought the best that they had, and Cain apparently didn't. His heart wasn't right. There was already something that was off, and so God says, if you do well, won't you be accepted? And so the intention is one thing, and then also bringing the right thing. And God says, bring me these things. I don't want just anything, but give me the best, right? And we see that he asks for the gold, silver, and bronze, blue, purple, and scarlet cloth or yarn, fine linen and goat hair, ram skins, dyed red, sealskin, porpoise, acacia wood, all these things. These are precious commodities. And who is He? Let me ask you this: who is He asking of these things from? People who have been slaves until now. Do slaves walk around with gold in their pockets? Clearly not. Right? And so, how could you be so, cruel, so hard-hearted? They just got this stuff, and they're finally moving up the economic ladder, and you're just knocking them down, asking for all their stuff. The comment is it wasn't theirs in the first place. I think it was, and we can disagree on that. That's okay. Right? They had it. It was theirs. But we don't. He says everybody asks and they'll give it to him and all that kind of stuff. So whether if we're looking at this from a stewardship perspective or however, right? Like there's different angles to look at. But I'm going to look at it as I asked it from my neighbor, they gave it to me, it's now mine, and I'm, trouncing out across the desert with, loaded down with good things. And so, so here God is saying, hey, bring all this nice, expensive things that you haven't had before, but I know you have them now, but I want you to give it to me only if you want to. And so God is taking, you could say, like from the richness of his people, and they are giving it to him, and he is building something. They're going to build something for him that is far more valuable than the sum of the parts that are contributed. Okay? So this is a similar question that is raised when, let's just say like a religious building is constructed, which, God willing, in the next few years we will be doing. We will find out. We don't know. But the question is, okay, why? Now, lately, in the last couple decades, this has not been the case. But in historically speaking, synagogues, cathedrals, churches have been very ornate, right? Beautiful. Sometimes, in the case of several cathedrals, it takes not just the equivalent of essentially billions of dollars, but sometimes hundreds of years to construct. And sometimes those are placed in very poor, very impoverished areas. And so the question is, how can you take, and often it's the people around that are contributing to make this happen, how can you take these peoples, which is probably one reason why it takes so long to make, how can you take this riches from these poor people and spend so much on a building? Wouldn't they be better served if you took that money and distributed it, and either distribute it directly to them or turn it into food or services they need or this kind of thing? Why are you wasting it on a building? Because it's not a waste. Because the value of the thing being constructed is worth more than what it took to make it. Does that make sense? So it's not just the idea of a craftsman where I take some kind of raw material and I form it into something either utilitarian or beautiful and artistic, and now we derive value from that in some sense. It's beyond that because it's meant to elevate us to God. It's meant to form some kind of a connection between the worshiper and the eternal, right? That it's something that takes us who are finite and connects it to us to the infinite God. And there's something that is of infinite value there that surpasses the value of the materials that were given for the formation of the thing. Does this make sense? Okay, so in this case, God says, "I want you to give to me from the richness that you have, or even out of your poverty, from whatever you have. I want you to give it to me as your heart moves you." God is not demanding it. It is, I'm giving it. Now, something that was brought up earlier is now every Israelite, every Jewish person that gives has a piece of the tabernacle. It doesn't matter if you are super wealthy, if you are super poor, how you give something, and now you can say, not that you own the tabernacle, not that you own the Mishkan, but that I did that. I was a part of that. Right? I'm invested in this thing that is happening and what's going on and in connecting to God. And so there's that element of it. And then the other thing is that as I'm giving this, it's with my whole heart, and it's to please God, to bless him. And what we're constructing is something that is of infinite value. God says, make me the tabernacle, make me the Mishkan, so that I can dwell among them. So this is enabling not just some kind of cult worship, and by cult we don't mean like either a cult, which is demonic, or cult like Jim Jones. We mean cult worship is the idea of something that is prescribed worship of a deity where everybody's together and doing the same thing in a set way. And so it's not just for facilitating even the cult worship, but it also is so that we can draw near to the presence of God. And here's one of the things that is revolutionary about what we are witnessing here is that the Mishkan is mobile, which also means that God's presence is either mobile or everywhere, right? And so this was something that was not common knowledge, was not part of the common thought of the day anywhere in the world, but that at this point deities had areas that they were in charge of, right? So in one sense we see, and later on, we see the Philistines saying, hey, we met them in the valley and we lost, let's go up on the hill and fight because, then our gods will be stronger, right? Because the idea is, well, their God must be the God of the valley. We'll go to the mountain and we'll fight there because then their valley God won't have any authority and he won't be able to work on their behalf. Well, that doesn't work with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? Because he's not bound by space or constrained by borders. He's everywhere, which is not meant to say that everything is God or something like that either. Anyway, as we get into this, there's a lot of bad ways that we could go. But the point is that God is wherever they are going to be, and God is wherever we're going to be. The difference is that we need help recognizing his presence. And so this is part of what Shabbat is, believe it or not. Shabbat is a time where we set things aside and our intention is turned from the cares of the life we normally have, from making a living, from maintaining a relationship, whatever it is that may stress us out, may preoccupy us, may concern us, and our intention and our heart is turned towards God. Because he says, on this day I'm going to meet with you and you meet with me. And so just as their intention was toward God when they're giving, now our intention is toward God on every Shabbat, and this is also during this time as well. Okay, so we have that they're giving they're giving of themselves, and they are making way for something that is of immeasurable value. Okay, when we give today, we can also give. What we're doing is we're not. So in our congregation, of course, we receive tithes and offerings and that sort of thing, and our members pledge and say, hey, we will give our tithe, which yes is a 10% of our income, to this place, and it's not. But here's the thing: is when you give, you're not giving saying, well, I'm going to give this to the Bridge Messianic Fellowship so that things can go on, or so that we can give remuneration to those running it or anything like that. It's our heart should not be that. Our heart should be, I'm giving this to God, and this is the vehicle by which I'm doing so. Okay, does that make sense? There's a similar thing. So there's that connection. Okay, so the next thing is that they didn't just do anything with the stuff that people gave, but God said to make it according to the pattern that I will show you. And later on, he tells Moses, make it according to the pattern that I showed you on the mountain. Okay? So God, just as God is prescribing a manner of worship, he's also prescribing how we are to use, or how they were to use, in this case, the goods and the raw materials that were given. And it was not just to make something beautiful for himself, but it was also to make certain implements in particular ways. And there are, even though we don't have a Mishkan, we don't have the tabernacle today, this is still significant. This is still important for us. One thing I want to call attention to before I move on is that he says gold, have them give gold, silver, and bronze, and then when they implement it, it's backwards, where the outer courts were the bronze, and then you come in there and silver, and then the holy place was like gold, right? So you're having this progression of from the common to the holy, from the less valuable to the more valuable, and that Holy of Holies was where the Ark of the Covenant was, the manifest presence of God, like all of these things that were highly significant. And so we see that was done intentionally to show that, no, this is what is important and valuable, which is the presence of God. Okay. Okay, so we have the next thing is that we have the Ark of the Covenant. So then he starts talking about the things that are made, and they go from basically the most important and the most holy to the least, right? Similar to when he said gold, silver, and bronze, he starts at the most valuable and goes to the least, which when it's implemented, it was reversed, right? Where you enter from the outside to the inside, the least to the most. Okay, and so. So he makes the Ark of the Covenant. Then he has the table for the showbread. He has the menorah. He makes all kinds of implements. One of the things that he makes is the altar, which there's the mercy seat, which is actually an altar that is part of the Ark of the Covenant, and then that would be in the Holy of Holies. But then there is also an altar that was out in the common place, right? And so, however, what happens once a year is the priest comes in on Yom Kippur and puts the blood on the altar of the mercy seat before the presence of God. Well, okay, good. We don't have the Ark. We don't have the Mishkan. We don't have, why is this significant? And what this is significant because this was to point to, remember, all of these things are copies of what is in heaven, right? And we're defining heaven as where God is. And so, as we go into this, I'm going to read, if you want to turn there with me, Hebrews chapter 9. What is going on here I think that one of the reasons why God spends so much time on the tabernacle and everything in it is not just because of what was not just what was happening at that time and moment, but it's also looking forward, right? Yeshua says that the law and the prophets speak of him. And so Hebrews chapter 9, verse 1, now even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. That's what this parsha is all about. For a tent was prepared, the first section in which there were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence. It is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a second section called the most holy place, having the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant covered on all sides with gold, which we'll talk about the altar of incense in a little bit. It was covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn burning the manna and Aaron's staff that budded and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot now speak in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second, only the high priest goes, and he but once a year, and not without taking blood. which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy places is not yet open as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age. According to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed until the time of Reformation. But when Messiah, verse 11, when Messiah appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, or potentially the good things to come, and anyway, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is not of this creation, right? We can insert in heaven, right? The greater and more perfect tent. This is the one that was the original, not the copy. Okay? Verse 12, he entered once for all into the holy places. Why is it places plural? Because he goes from the holy place to the most holy place. Not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctified for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Messiah, who entered through the eternal Spirit, offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God? Therefore, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, since a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. Okay, here is another reason why all of the details of the Mishkan and later the temple still hold significance for us today. They were copies. I know I've said this a few times already, but they were copies of what was in heaven. They were never meant to be eternal. They were never meant to be forever. At least not for the forgiveness of sins. So, the significance here is that we have the most important things, right? After everything is constructed, he says, in the most holy place we have the Ark of the Covenant that has the mercy seat, which is, we're told, an altar. And once a year, the high priest would go in and put the blood of the goat for the Lord on that altar. And this was for the unintentional sins of the people, and it was meant to make it so they could continue to commune with God. What happens when Yeshua, who gives himself in Ezekiel 16, the end of that chapter, God says that he is going to atone for his people. And when he does that, God says that they will forget their iniquity, they will forget their shame and their guilt. He says, in the day that I atone for you. So Yeshua, after his crucifixion, death, burial, resurrection, he ascends to heaven where the writer of Hebrews says he goes into the holy places, and especially into the most holy place, and he puts his blood on the original, not on the copy on earth, but on the original that is in heaven, and he makes atonement for his people and for all of mankind, for anybody who would put their faith in him and say, like, I don't come before you, Adonai Tsevaot, Lord of hosts, Lord of armies, the God of the universe, the creator of all things. I don't come before you in my own goodness and my own righteousness, thinking that I have done enough mitzvot, enough commandments, enough good things to ever merit, earn eternal life, salvation, forgiveness, or absolution of sins before you. I don't come before you in my own merit. I come before you and I plead the blood of Yeshua that is on the altar in your presence, in that holy of holies that is in heaven. That is my atonement, and that is what will cover me. That is the sacrifice that atones for my sin and for my life, because he says the life is in the blood, and so is the life of Yeshua that makes atonement for my life and for my sins. Hallelujah. This is the significance. is that we need to understand God is explaining to us in various ways the mechanics of how forgiveness works. Do we understand why forgiveness works? Why does it work? Why did God want the sacrifice of bulls and goats and lambs? Why did he want that? The short answer is we just don't know. What we know is that he wants it. That was what atoned. And how it works is that blood cries out, right? We see this in the blood of Abel in Genesis 3 and 4, like where Cain rises against Abel and kills him, and God says, "Hey, Cain, where's your brother? His blood is crying out to me from the ground." And the blood of Yeshua far surpasses that of Cain, or excuse me, of Abel. And so, okay, so this is the part of the significance. And here's the other thing, is that we learn in Leviticus 16 that at Yom Kippur, the sacrifice, there's two goats. There's the goat for the Lord and the Azazel, the going away goat, the disappearing goat, the scapegoat. Okay, we learn that when the high priest brings the blood of the goat for the Lord into the Holy of Holies, that the implements that he's sprinkling with blood is not cleansing it for God's benefit. He says it's cleansing it from the sins of the people, right? So that God would continue to be among them. This is a key part of this passage when God says that he will dwell among his people. In verse 8, 25:8, I have them make a sanctuary, a mishkan for me, so that I may dwell among them. And this is the entire point of the mishkan, is for God's presence to be with his people and for them to recognize it. For us sometimes to recognize the presence of God, when we give of something, now there's a shift. Like it costs me something to come into the presence of the Lord. It's very simple. Like we've the last couple thousand years have been spent decontextualizing the good news, the gospel that through Yeshua we have access to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And if you don't grow up in that lineage and that heritage, you don't know what that means. And we've spent a long time decontextualizing it so that those who are outside of the lineage of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob can understand that there is a God in Israel and that there is sin and that separates us, and that we need to be connected back with our Creator. And then Yeshua is his atonement is the mechanism by which we do that. But we've lost in that process so much understanding of what that meant and the cost associated with that. One of the reasons for the Mishkan, one of the reasons for the sacrificial system, was for us to recognize the cost of our sin, the gravity of what we do, and how it affects our relationship with God and also us as individuals. And God says that he gives the Torah, he gives the instruction he says, for your good and your children always. Right? It's not because we're doing him a favor, but he's doing it on our behalf. Everything is for our behalf. It's not, look at the good that we're doing for God. It's the opposite. And so as we come to understand more about the Mishkan and more about the temple and constructing it, then we recognize that it's really not for God's benefit. Even though he's saying, hey, make me a tabernacle so I can dwell among them, it's really an inverted benefit. where he's saying, yeah, make it for me so I can be, but it's a really good thing that I'm going to be among you. Not only that, but it's a really good thing that God is giving the direction for how to create it, because as we've seen at the last, say, 20, maybe a little bit over, 20 plus years, 20 to 30 years, if we look into the art world that is more and more gone away from God, when in the last several millennia, 2,000 to 3,000 years, we've seen that art has come out of godliness, right? And the Mishkan is like the beginning of this, where it was immaculate, beautiful, gorgeous, and it wasn't, God didn't come and say, just make it whatever you want. He said, make it like this and like this. He gives some kind of boundaries. He says, this is beautiful. This is what beauty is. This is what holiness is. This is how your expressive nature is going to be best served, is within these guidelines. And so it's not any wonder that actual beauty comes from those who are seeking God and trying to honor him. Okay. I don't want to keep going on and on. This is all these different things, and there's far more besides. I'm not like I don't know everything, but we're not exhausting the topic, right? But we can take the concepts of what went into the Mishkan in all these different ways. Yes, from the financial side, and it has to cost me something, and going back, somebody mentioned the widow's 2 mites earlier. Why would this poor woman give everything she has, Yeshua says? And he doesn't, you notice that he doesn't run up and take it out and give it to her, or give her something in replacement. Did you ever wonder about that? Why? Why? Like, he sees this woman who gives, he says she's given more than all these guys who are it's called, blasting the trumpet or something. I can't remember, but, sounding the trumpet, right? When they toss their big amounts of money into the pots, right? He says she put in more than all of them because she gave all that she had. He doesn't go and replace it then and say, oh, you know what? I see that cost you. Let me help you out. Why? Because that would rob her. Right? It would rob her of the benefit of actually giving to God. It was her intention to give everything that she had. She wanted to show him, like, I don't have much, but you can have all of it. And that's what worship is. Right? This is the Mishkan was in the formation of it. It was for worship, but it was worship in itself to make it. And so, anyway, okay. So we have implications for worship. We have implications for finances. We have implications for art and all these different things that are beautifying. God is the one that says, "Hey, use music to worship me." Right? It's not just something that that mankind stumbled upon. There's actually, it's not something that we just came up on ourselves and said, "Oh, I like the way that sounds. Let's figure something out in this whole system." No, I would not be shocked if God himself came down and taught people how to do this, right? How to create music. And our liturgy is sung for a reason, right? Because it's beautiful, because it's worshiper. What are we saying when we come and we give our liturgy? I'm running over time a little bit. When we give our worship, it's the intention of our heart that gives it significance and meaning. Often when I'm reciting the liturgy, when I'm singing a worship song, in my heart and in my mind's eye, I'm imagining that I'm before the throne of God, and I'm saying this to him, and he's hearing it, and there's our imagination was given to us by God as a way to connect to him, and that's a way that we can change the intention of our heart to be towards him, to be lifted heavenward, and not just stuck here and what we can see in the physical and in the hard stuff, but in the ethereal and the things that we can't touch with our hands, but we can see in our mind's eye. And so all of these things we get from the Mishkan. All of these things we get from the construction of the tabernacle and all that. And I'm sure far more besides. So, all right. Hallelujah. Okay, we're going to bring, we're not